Forget everything you know about fairy tales. Because this is no bedtime story. It is the year 1609, deep in the hills of the Kingdom of Hungary. Winter grips the land, and villagers whisper of a fortress where screams echo through the night. Girls disappear, one after another, vanishing without a trace. The fortress has a name, Cactus Castle. And its mistress, Countess Elizabeth Báthory, is one of the most powerful women in all of Europe. But behind her high walls, they say she commits acts so vile, so grotesque, that even demons would look away in horror. Witnesses whisper that she tortures servant girls for sport, that she locks them in chambers of iron, that she cuts them, burns them, starves them, until death itself seems a mercy. And the most horrifying rumor of all? That she bathes in their blood. Because Elizabeth, who was born into unimaginable wealth and power, was obsessed with one thing, staying young. And to her, youth had a price, paid in the lives of innocent girls. By the time soldiers stormed her castle on December 30th, 1610, they would claim to find mutilated bodies, chained captives, and pools of blood so fresh they were still warm. Was Elizabeth Báthory the most prolific female serial killer in history, responsible for over 600 deaths? Or was she the victim of a ruthless political conspiracy? This is the story of the Blood Countess, the queen who bathed in blood to stay young. You're watching Royal Conspiracies, where we uncover the darkest secrets buried in history. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share this video, so you never miss these forbidden tales of power, betrayal, and blood. Now, let's begin our journey into the terrifying legend of Elizabeth Báthory. On August 7, 1560, Elizabeth Báthory was born into one of the most powerful dynasties in Central Europe. The Báthorys were no ordinary nobles. They were warlords, princes, even kings. Her uncle, Stephen Báthory, would become the king of Poland. Her cousins ruled Transylvania, that mysterious land forever linked to legends of vampires. From the moment she was born, Elizabeth was told she was destined for greatness. But her childhood was far from gentle. At her family's estates, public executions were common entertainment. It's said that Elizabeth, still a child, watched men impaled on spikes, a brutal punishment designed to keep peasants in fear. There are whispers that Elizabeth suffered from epileptic seizures, a result of inbreeding that ran through many noble families. Treatments at the time were barbaric, sometimes involving rubbing the blood of non-sufferers onto the lips of the afflicted. It is chilling to imagine what seeds such practices may have planted in her young mind. Elizabeth grew up in a world where violence was normal, cruelty was discipline, and nobility meant you were above the law. At age 15, Elizabeth was married off to Count Ferenc Nadasdy, a Hungarian nobleman feared across Europe as the Black Knight. The wedding in 1575 was an event of spectacle and power, thousands of guests, noble gifts from kings, and a dowry that included Cactus Castle, a fortress perched high above the countryside, destined to become infamous. But this marriage was not one of love. Ferenc was often away fighting wars against the Ottomans, leaving Elizabeth to manage vast estates and hundreds of servants. It was here that her cruelty began to show. Servants feared her quick temper. Villagers whispered that girls sent to work in her castle often disappeared. Yet none dared challenge her, for she was untouchable. By the late 1580s, strange rumors surrounded Elizabeth. Servants spoke of punishments that went far beyond what was common. Beatings until bones broke. Needles pushed under fingernails. Mouths sewn shut for speaking out of turn. Some claimed she smeared honey on girls and left them outside, their bodies devoured by insects. Her husband Ferenc, when not at war, encouraged such cruelty. Soldiers taught Elizabeth tortures they used against enemies. But in 1604, Ferenc died unexpectedly at just 48. Whether from war wounds, illness, or poison remains a mystery. Elizabeth, now a widow at 44, became the absolute ruler of her lands. And with no one to restrain her, the whispers of cruelty turned into screams of horror. Legend claims the obsession began with an accident. One day, Elizabeth struck a servant girl in anger. Blood splashed onto her skin. Later, as she looked in the mirror, she believed her skin appeared smoother, younger. From then on, Elizabeth convinced herself that blood was the secret to eternal youth. She began ordering her maids to bring her peasant girls, offering them work at the castle. They were never seen again. Witnesses later claimed she drained their blood into basins, bathing in the crimson liquid while servants scrubbed her pale skin. Others whispered she even drank it. Whether fact or myth, the stories spread like wildfire, and soon Cactus Castle became feared as a place of nightmares. By 1609, hundreds of girls had disappeared. Witnesses described secret chambers, iron cages where girls were trapped until their bodies collapsed, cold courtyards, where Elizabeth forced victims to run naked in the snow before dousing them in water, freezing them alive. A rumored Iron Maiden, where sharpened spikes pierced bodies as Elizabeth watched with delight. One surviving servant claimed the Countess sometimes laughed while bathing, her body dripping red. The death toll, according to testimonies, climbed to over 600 girls. The castle was no longer just a home, it was a slaughterhouse. The Catholic Church began to notice. Priests recorded in parish logs that dozens of young women were missing from villages around the Báthory estates. But Elizabeth was a countess, wealthy, noble, connected. No peasant dared accuse her openly. That is, until noble families also began losing daughters. These were not faceless peasants. They were young women of wealth and bloodline. By 1609, complaints reached the royal court in Vienna. And one man in particular took notice, King Matthias II of Hungary. Elizabeth had overreached. By targeting noble girls, she had threatened the very structure of aristocracy. Matthias ordered Count Georgi Thurzo, Palatine of Hungary, to investigate. Thurzo was both a relative and political rival of Elizabeth. His loyalty to the king was greater than family. He began building a case, collecting testimonies from villagers, priests, and servants. Some claimed Elizabeth sacrificed girls in rituals. Others said they saw her drinking blood by candlelight. It was clear, the Countess had to be stopped. On a freezing winter night, December 30th, 1610, soldiers stormed Cactus Castle. What they found, according to reports, was terrifying. Dead bodies scattered across the chambers. Others still alive, chained, their flesh torn. Pools of blood staining the stone floors. Elizabeth was discovered standing in the great hall, calm and composed, as though nothing unusual had happened. The Blood Countess had finally been caught. In January 1611, the trial began. Elizabeth's servants were tortured into confession. They admitted everything. That Elizabeth bathed in blood. That she killed with knives, scissors, branding irons. That she froze girls alive and burned them. The testimonies shocked the court. Elizabeth herself, however, was never put on trial. As a noblewoman, the scandal was too great. Publicly executing her could destabilize Hungary. Instead, her servants were executed, burned, or decapitated. Elizabeth was sentenced to life imprisonment. Here lies the great debate. Was Elizabeth truly guilty of over 600 murders? Or was she a victim of political conspiracy? Consider, King Matthias owed the Báthory family a massive debt. By destroying Elizabeth, he could seize her lands and cancel the debt. The number 600 victims comes mainly from servants' confessions under torture. Could they have exaggerated to save themselves? No contemporary records prove the blood-bathing legend. It may have been added later, feeding into vampire myths. Perhaps Elizabeth was cruel, yes. Perhaps she abused and killed servants. But was she the supernatural monster history paints her as? Or was her story twisted for profit and power? Elizabeth was bricked into a room at Cactus Castle. Only small openings were left to pass food. For 4 years, she lived in darkness, isolated from the world. On August 21, 1614, guards found her dead. She was 54 years old. Her body was buried quickly and later moved. Today, her grave is lost, vanished, like the truth of her story. Elizabeth Báthory's legend did not die with her. Her story spread across Europe, inspiring vampire folklore. Some scholars believe she directly influenced Bram Stoker's Dracula in 1897. To this day, she is remembered as either the most prolific female serial killer in history, with over 600 victims, or a tragic victim of conspiracy destroyed by politics and myth. We may never know the full truth. But one thing is certain: the queen who bathed in blood achieved what she desired. In legend, she is immortal. And that, my friends, is the chilling story of Elizabeth Báthory, the Blood Countess. If you want more stories of royal conspiracies, dark myths, and forbidden history, hit subscribe, like this video, and share it with others who crave the darkest side of the past. Because history is not always crowns and thrones. Sometimes it drips with blood.